All right. Well, hello, everyone. Very nice to have you all here. To those of you who don't know, my name is Naama Kostiner. I'm a clinical psychotherapist. I'm an artisan and also a guide and a coach. And I have my own coaching business since 2007, focused on purpose management. It's 1 a.m. where I'm at, so bear with me. I made notes here so I wouldn't lose focus at this time of day, but I'm already feeling jolted and inspired to be here with you, and we're having such a lovely summit. I hope that you're enjoying it as much as I am. I'm watching all my colleagues online. Today's topic is really close to my heart. It's called Jolting Inspirational Purpose. For as long as I remember, I felt passionate about this topic, and it still strikes me how relevant it is, especially nowadays with the pandemic going on and all the financial changes around the world, massive individual shifts, the restrictions on flying. It just seems like, we're all here trying to figure out what's coming next, what's going to unfold, and what's the best way to still cope with it and still live an inspired life. Throughout the years, I've been expanding my understanding on these topics through studies of consciousness, psychology research, as well as living with Native American shamans and healers in the Amazon and Mexico. But in order to understand better what inspirational purpose actually means, we need to dive in and firstly understand inspiration itself. So inspiration by its core is an element that's deeply engraved in the soul of the universe. It runs deep in the heart of humanity, as we're all conditioned to view it as crucial, substantial. It's a sought after experience. And the ancestors said that actually inspiration comes from an outside source, like it doesn't belong to us, it comes from the gods. So as the gods basically blow into us, sort of put their air and wisdom into us, then we become embodied with their energy, and we can experience sudden bursts of creativity, eureka moments. And for centuries, the role of inspiration has been designed to be fundamental in creating processes, connecting mankind with higher purpose and vision. That even Albert Einstein called inspiration the only real thing. Steve Jobs called it more powerful than intellect. And yet, in our goal-oriented society, as we see it all the time, where tasks are usually pre-planned and measured, there seems to be less room for connecting to who we are, to our unique selves, and making space to be inspirationally guided towards purpose. We tend to push away our dreams and distract ourselves from stressful emotions. And over time, this coping strategy can become a blueprint for disconnection from our purpose in life, affecting almost everything we do and how we feel, from the way we handle our financial situation to our ability to call and maintain abundant lifestyles, healthy relationships, and of course, our physical health. Basically, the further we steer away from our element, the drier we would feel, as though, we were led by some sort of an outside source, not knowing who's actually calling the shots, like we were sleepwalking through life. Sounds familiar? I'm sure all of us have been through that sometimes. But is there a way to wake up and actually live an inspiring purpose and life, even in times like this? Well, modern day writer Elizabeth Gilbert, which you may know from Eat, Pray, Love, actually has this very nice book called Big Magic, where she talks about inspiration and treats it again like some sort of an external entity, saying that basically inspiration doesn't belong to us. It roams freely in this collective consciousness, and once we're open enough, we can actually allow it to flow in. And she tells of this very funny little tale that she actually came back with this idea of writing a book about a woman in the Amazon. And she started, going through it, collecting the materials, and basically at a point, for personal reasons, she had to put it aside for a while. And coming back to it a while later, I think around 2 years later, she discovered that there's this lady that she knows nothing about that basically wrote the same book, that has already finished a manuscript about a lady in the Amazon with almost the exact same story. Now, ask yourself, how can that be? Elizabeth Gilbert, of course, says it just feels like inspiration was this thing flowing around, call it gods, call it collective consciousness, and I wasn't available for it. So seems this idea is just roaming freely, looking for a host. And once I wasn't in it for a while, it just landed on somebody else's lap. How many times have you thought of this great idea, even written it down, and then the next thing you know, you hear on the news that somebody else has just opened a startup and you're like, oh, they stole my song, they stole my idea. So I call this the faucet effect. We all have faucets in our homes that provide water for us to get clean, to wash ourselves, to quench our thirst. And of course, water is so substantial for us because it's the thing that keeps us alive. Our bodies are 75% water. As you know, Earth is 75% water, so we mimic the Earth. Maybe there's even more percentage to that. And basically, you know, that if a man would walk in the desert for 3 days, the first thing he would want to do is quench his thirst. It wasn't even about food, it's always about water, and then we'd be drinking out of a puddle. What allows us to receive this water in our home is the faucet. So we don't praise the faucet, of course, we praise the water, but if the faucet is closed, then it's very difficult for the water to come out if it's plugged. So what we pay attention to is the water flow. And if we look at ourselves like typical faucets, it's the amount of openness or closeness that we have towards consciousness that allows this inspirational flow to kind of come in. So basically what I'm saying through these examples is that I don't know if inspiration comes from the God or how it receives its way through collective consciousness, through universe, call it whatever you want. What I do know is that when the mind is plugged, it's very difficult for us to listen to it, and especially in times like this. So in order to go into this and understand basically why is it difficult to stay an open faucet, let's talk a bit about the brain. And this is a bit reassuring because the first thing I'm going to say, guys, is it's not your fault. If it's hard to feel inspired once you're doing something very monotonic or very gray or living the sort of same daily routine, it's not your fault if you find it hard to get inspired. And it's not your fault because this resorts as the beginning in the brain. Now, why does this happen? There's a part in our brain that really loves being inspired. You know, they talk about the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain. So there's a part of us that's really sort of clinging to art, to creativity, that loves all of this. But there's also another part that doesn't like this thing at all. Now, this may sound surprising, but why is this happening? It's because we have some sort of like a calculated functional network in our brain that keeps us task oriented, and it relies on memory and really helps us function. It begins working since the day we're born and even before, and it relies on our memory to keep us running. For example, think about if you had to think each time again and teach yourself how to do basic things like brush your teeth, drive, or even walk or talk. You know, seems like an instinct now, but at a point when we were babies, we couldn't talk. We needed to teach ourselves to do that. Have you ever heard or noticed what happens to people that have suffered a stroke? First of all, you know, there's a hit to the nervous system, but also usually the areas that get sort of damaged are also memory areas. So they have to teach themselves, reteach themselves to do basic things, sometimes to walk, to move their arm, to speak. So we take this for granted many times, but the brain is this magical mechanism that actually relies on all of this repetition to create habits. So even walking is a habit based on memory. So habits originally based on memory are a good thing. Now, each time we have this habit that we repeat on and on and on, and this is how our system learns, there's like this pathway, electrical pathway created in the brain that we call neural pathway. It actually looks like an electrical stream that you can watch on PET scans. It's really, really cool. But there are these neurotransmitters firing up in this sort of like a usual freeway, very, very fast. And the brain is just helping us achieve tasks, you know, do what we're supposed to do, function, survive this way, which is great. This is why it really doesn't like any disturbances and bringing in all sorts of crazy ideas, jolting ideas, inspirational ideas. It's like the other side of the brain goes, no, stop there. You're not going anywhere. And this is why we feel like we need to battle ourselves every time we want to try something new. And I mean it. It could be as basic as new food where we go, I'm not sure I'm going to eat this. but it could be things that we deal with every day, like going to the gym, for example. We know it's good for us. We know it's going to keep us fit and healthy, but we don't want to do it. Maybe we have motivation for a few days, and then guess what happens? The brain starts saying, you know what, I'm tired. This is too hard. I don't have time for this. And when you ask yourself, why is this happening? But it's good for me. It's that this network that's supposed to help us survive is just too busy maintaining itself and doesn't want you to disturb. It's very comfortable being in this zone, even when the habits that we acquire are negative, such as overeating or smoking. If any of you are having addictions, and we all have addictions, be it the minor ones or even thought patterns. If we're used to negatively speaking about ourselves, of course, there's a conscious side of the mind that says, no, this is not good for me. It's not going to take me anywhere. But the other side of your brain is going, oh, I'm used to thinking like that. Don't change it, please. And I'm going to get you like 100 excuses why this is the truth. So it just sounds so convincing. And when we try to break this, it's almost like, going to war with yourself. And we start sending contradicting vibes, to the universe, and even psychologically to everything around us, to all of our surroundings. So what's actually being created is very interesting, but this like an invisible ceiling that we cannot see, but is there. Now, the brain creates the ceiling and says everything that goes around this ceiling is the norm. If you go below it or you go above it, you're in trouble. What does this mean? Let me give you an example about money, for example. Money is a very good example, especially in our times, and the brain really loves it when you have a usual amount coming into your bank account, or when it knows, for example, if you start making a lot of money, you're going to get scared, because the brain is like, what's going on here? Perhaps it's a one-time thing. I'm not too comfortable with this. So basically, the brain likes something constant and consistent. So when we have a salary and we know how much we're receiving, the brain is like, happy, even if we're not, even if the other side of us says, I want to make more money. So what actually happens, give it a try, and I'm sure you've all done this before or been there before. If you earn less than the brain is used to, than this glass ceiling is used to receiving, it's going to tell you, alarm's going to go off. And then what happens is that this alarm is going to send you off to get more money. All of a sudden, perhaps for some of us, the creative side of the brain is going to be open so you can have new ideas to make money, or we're going to get more stressed, which is not the creative side. I'll get to that in a bit. But we're going to have to think about functional ways to get more money. Now, once we do it, we'll have motivation to work hard, to do this, to do that, because we're looking for solutions. But guess what happens after a while? Guess what happens after you acquire this amount of money that you were lacking? The brain, that's right, the glass ceiling is going to say, stop. We've gotten where we're used to, now you can back down. And I've got clients come to me and say, I don't understand this. I've had so much motivation to work on this project. I've been, waking up early in the morning. I've been meditating. And all of a sudden, for no reason, I just stopped, or I earned so much and I just spent all my money and I don't understand. It's because your brain is used to being in the same place. I've had another client say, I'd like to increase my social affairs and have more friends, but she's used to having, let's say, 2 friends. And anything she would do, she'll always end up with just 2 friends, because there's something that's going to be sabotaging. Believe me, guys, this is unbelievable, but it's true. So this glass ceiling works vice versa. If you have too much, it's going to get you back down. And if you have too little, it's going to get you back up. But there's no real thing as too much or too little. Limitations don't really exist. And I think this is where we get to the other side of our talk now, to the other part. But basically, limitations don't exist. Speaking of these times of COVID, people are very, very busy with what's going on here and how limited we are, but the universe isn't limited. It's only us. Creativity isn't gone. And this is what brings me to the hazards of what really happens and where we stop ourselves and how this glass ceiling really works. So there are 4 major ways that this glass ceiling would work on us and stop us from living an inspirational, empowering purpose. The first one is resisting change. And this is very clearly what's happening now. I mean, all of us have a lot of adapting to do. because, you know, I suppose none of us in this lifetime have been through such an ordeal with a pandemic. Mm. We're basically puzzled about, you know, how to handle our finances, what's going to happen. Many people have to change their vocation and think about new ways to make a living. So it's a challenge, of course. But what happens, and you'll see it in the mass media, is that, you know, because the media is also drama based, because drama sells, there's going to be a lot of messing about with, let's get back to normality. And you're going to see all these charts. So on one hand, there are these charts of telling you how many people are sick with COVID and how many people are well. And believe me, I'm traveling, well, not now, but normally, you know, I'm multilingual. I see charts from all over the world. And I just, out of curiosity, I read the news in a few different countries, and it's just incredible. It's all the same. You have these charts of how life is similar to what it was before. And you hear people saying, I want things to get back to what they were. And, you know, my heart goes out to this because, of course, everybody's life has changed. Mine too. I mean, I'm used to flying and I can't do that now so easily, and etc. So many other things. But thing is this, that once we resist change, we don't really accept what's happening to us. We don't accept that change is actually a constant, that life was never sought out to be. And living an inspirational purpose, purpose sounds like something very planned, but it's not the truth. We can plan our purpose, but once we plan it, there has to be a margin that's open for surprises and actually open for the universe's messages. Because, you know, when I'm asked about COVID, I always tell people I'm not, you know, making COVID a good thing or a bad thing. You know, I know it's not a positive thing overall that we're all going through, but we have to accept the fact that it's existing and it's here. And, you know, talking about what could be or trying to push and get back to what was isn't going to get us anywhere. And the beliefs that, you know, no one can thrive at such times, these are limiting beliefs. These are beliefs that the brain is just happy to have every day, on and on and on, because that's what it's used to thinking. This is how it's been programmed. It's not your fault. Culturally programmed by our parents, by our schools, by our societies, by the media. This is how we think. And, you know, it's unexplainable how, you know, in the 1920s, the world has known the most gigantic economical crisis that, you know, that's ever been in modern times. And yet the greatest millionaires of all time came out of that period. So how do you explain that? Oh, I'm sure your brains are going to have many ways of explaining that to me. So it was a rhetorical question, because there comes the other side of the brain telling me that it's not possible, right? Anyway, once we resist what's happening, we cannot leverage the situation into something good. You know, I help clients from all over the world, and I had this client of mine, I asked her permission to use the stories. By the way, everything I tell you is by permission. And of course, she came to me wanting to start a new business now with COVID. And she said to me, you know what, travel has always been my passion, and I want my business to focus on travel. And I was thinking, okay, sweetheart, that's great. But, you know, how fast do you need the income? I'm just being straightforward. And she said, well, I need it pretty bad. And I said, well, that's not going to work, is it? So my client, you know, she felt sort of, you know, depressed and hurt. She says, what, are you trying to discourage me? And I said, no, not at all. I think your dream is beautiful. But look at where we are. I mean, let's talk about it in a year or so. If you need the cash now, we're going to have to find a way to either alter it and make something about travel fit what we're doing now, or talk about something else. Otherwise, you know, we're not accepting what is. And accepting what is really a bridge to, you know, openness. I don't know how many of you have been here when we just started getting people in the room, and I said, you know, how incredible it is that we cannot travel necessarily, but the connectivity and what we're doing right here in Zoom. I mean, technologies are marching uphill with all of this, and we're able to connect in other ways. And there's so much leverage and so much work we can do on the internet. So I know it's new, I know it's uncomfortable for most of us, and we're going to find the most magnificent excuses not to do it. But basically, trust me, this is a tip. The internet, I guess I'm not telling anything new to any of you, but it's just an example. It doesn't have to be the internet, but there's always something to do. So this is the first thing that's sort of, standing in our way. The second thing is, and it's related to the first part, is that we do the math for the universe. And I personally love this one in a cynical but funny way, because I look at myself doing the same. But we have this calculus thing in our brain. I call it the order of operations, where we decide what comes first and what comes second. Now, let me explain myself, but it seems like we all believe that things need to be running in a certain order in the universe. And actually, universe doesn't follow any of this nonsense. Because once we do it, for example, I'll give you an example about food. When we go into a restaurant, then what would we do normally, wanting to have like a full course meal, right? We would start out asking for a starter and then a main course, and then comes dessert. But truly, I mean, who said that this is the most palatable way? And does it make a difference to the stomach? Think about it. Does digestion care about what you ate first, if you're just going to eat them all one after the other? The answer is no. 100% no. And what happens if I want to go into a restaurant and ask for dessert, and then I want to eat the main course, and then I want a starter, then I want another dessert? I mean, is there really a rule to it? And most of it is culturally based, because, for example, in the East, in China, you could be eating like a main meal. They would put this big tray on the table for people with lots of rice and seafood like lobster, and next to it you'll have fruit, and you just eat everything together. And these are just rules that we invented. And the funny thing that I always laugh about is that, once we create machines, when man created machines, we had these, we're the ones that made them. So they come with manuals, even if for your coffee machine, for your fridge, like everything that's around you comes with a manual. But man didn't come with manuals. We weren't created by us, or whatever created us didn't come and tell us, how the brain works and why we do all these calculations. But the truth is that, the brain is such a magnificent machine, but many of the things we actually believe in don't make any sense, at least not to the universe, because the universe doesn't have this table of charts. And to put you more inside it, I'm going to tell you another story. And yes, I tell a lot of stories, I know, but there's a lot of emphasis. And the real cute thing here is that I had a client a couple of years ago that had this perfect dream about a house that he was going to build. He really wanted a house with a pool and like a architecturally designed garden, and it was all really beautiful. And so one day he got the chance, and he got a terrain, and he was really eager to start planning. And from that moment on, everything went downhill. He had so many jurisdiction problems with the terrain, and he had to go to court with all sorts of people. And it was just, it seems like the whole thing was postponing itself, procrastinating, and nothing was happening. And he was so frustrated, and the only thing he could talk about was that, and why wasn't it working? Okay, so we start working on this, purpose management and inspirational purpose together. And then one day he gets a call from a friend in Los Angeles. And that friend is a producer. And he basically tells him, you know what, I'm going to be leaving for Hong Kong for 6 months. And for regulations in Hong Kong, I can't take my dogs with me. Now, I need to leave pretty soon, and I didn't find a sitter for the dogs, and I'm in trouble. And I was thinking about you because you're in between jobs, and I know you're going through all this, mischief and things in court. So I thought it might be a nice break for you to come here. And guess how the producer's house looks? Was I talking about this designed gardens and the pool? Exactly like that. And guess what my client said? Can you guess? He said no. Now, I went on to my client to try to understand what's going on. Why did you say no? I can't believe it. And he said to me, well, I don't know. It's not the way I planned it to be. I planned first comes starter, then comes main course, then comes dessert. I didn't plan it to be this way. I planned it to be my house. And I said, well, is this contradicting? Can you not be in his house and have your house. You know, it's funny, but sometimes I ask people, or people come and talk to me about money, and I try to coach them, and they tell me, as long as we're healthy, everything's good. And I say, yeah, well, great that you're healthy, but what does this have to do with your finances? Does it have to be this one or the other one? Are we telling the universe what to do, or do we believe that one thing contradicts the other, or how does this work exactly? So we believe in all these crazy, honestly, crazy making, ludicrous thoughts, and we believe them like they were, you know, the mere book of rules. And I'm always wondering, who wrote these rules? Who invented them? Why do we believe in them? So after talking some sense into my client, of course he left. And guess what happened then? Can you guess? I'm sure you can guess that everything with the terrain got solved just like that. Now, you can ask me, how is that possible? How could that happen? How is it related? Well, this basically leads me to to rule number 3 that's stopping us, which is pushing. Sometimes when we want something, we push too hard. And when we push, we're actually sort of distributing an energy of lack. We're basically saying, I'm lacking this. This is something I don't have. You must have seen this, you know, many times when we, for example, when a person wants to go out with us, and we don't want them, and they're pushing, they're making themselves, you know, they're making themselves repelling. This is what we do with energy when we push, because when I say all the time, I want something, I want to acquire something, I want to acquire something, why isn't it working? I need it, I need it, I want it, I want it, I want it. What am I actually saying? I'm saying I want it because I don't have it. I'm lacking, I'm lacking, I'm lacking, I'm lacking, I'm lacking. What is the universe here? I'm lacking, I'm lacking, I'm lacking, I'm lacking, I'm lacking. And then sometimes it gets intertwined with the other thing that I was just talking about telling universe how to bring things to us. What's the right order? That we completely get distracted, that the universe doesn't abide to these rules. It does not abide to these rules. We invented them. There's everything possible in the universe. All possibilities can come to us when we're open faucets. So, you know, it's almost like having a homeless person walk on the streets, shoeless, really, and it's cold, needing a pair of shoes, and he's looking, window shopping in this shop, and he sees a new pair of Adidas, and he really likes them. And then the next day, some guy walks up to him and gives him a pair of Adidas. Now, they're not new, they've been worn. But then the homeless guy says, no, I'm not going to take this. They're my size, but I wanted new ones. Are you kidding me? And this is what we do. You know, you were shoeless 5 minutes ago, and you're going to tell the universe, I don't want these Adidas because they're not new. So this is what we do. And then we push, getting back to the push position. To describe better the whole thing about pushing, I'm actually going to tell you a tale about Paul Dolan. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a psychotherapist and an author doing recent research about happiness that I'm very fond of his writing. But, you know, when he got famous, it wasn't about or because his writing or research in the beginning. It was because he had this very, very awkward speech disorder. So he would go on stage and it would be very strange listening to him and almost impossible to understand. He had this stutter and he had this way of pronouncing and would just get stuck on words, and, you know, speeches would last forever, the talks, and I just couldn't understand why he even bothered, you know, to do this. Until one day, Paul Dolan decides to go to a speech therapist now, and he's an old man, you know, a mature man, and he goes and he talks to the speech therapist, and the speech therapist says, look, as far as technique goes, there's not much new that I can do with you, but we're going to do something else. We're going to exercise something else. And to do that, we're actually going to ditch the speech therapy. So of course, Paul Dolan is puzzled, and he says, but didn't I come here for speech therapy? He says, yes, I know, but we're going to ditch it. We're going to do something else. So he starts working with him on the text of what he talks about, and he asks him questions such as, why are you in love with the text? Why are you in love with the message that you're conveying, that you're putting out there? And without paying attention, gradually Paul Dolan starts getting really immersed by specific techniques with what he's actually saying, but with the text, with the contextual level, and not with the way it sounds. And guess what happens? His speech disorder starts lowering and he becomes way more understandable. It's incredible. So after that, Paul Dolan goes back and writes about happiness and says, you know, it's almost the same when you try to push yourself to be inspired, when you try to push yourself to be happy, it never works. You know, these people that come to you when you're sad and they're like, yeah, you're going to be all right, or start giving you like this big questionnaire of what's wrong. How annoying is that? Because if you could feel okay, you'd already be feeling okay. So it doesn't really help. So here's what my take on it. You know, happiness and sadness are usually both sort of caused by external circumstances. We get great news and then we're all excited and happy, or we hear something sad that makes us feel a bit crumbly, or something not nice happened to us and we're affected. So it's usually an effect of a circumstance. And happiness is just so exciting and so light that it comes in fast and also flows out fast, unfortunately, because of its lightness. And sadness sort of tends to stick around. And so we can't really rely on sadness or happiness the same way we can't really rely on inspiration. What could we rely on? It's actually having an open faucet, which literally means being okay, feeling vital, doing vital things for ourselves every day. And then if happiness comes, we'll have the space to accept it. But we're going to be okay anyway. So this is how it works. And you know, what I'm actually saying about this is that it's not about shoving away your issue. Don't get me wrong. This is definitely, absolutely not what I'm saying. We do not shove away our fears, our, you know, challenges, what's bothering us. No. But it doesn't mean that if we obsess about it and push all the time, this is how we solve it. And this is what the brain is trying to do. That area of the brain that has this very solid network is trying to solve something. So it thinks that if it runs it by you over and over and over and over again, this is how it's going to be solved. And guess what? It does exactly the opposite. I think one of the most vivid stories that that we have. Oh, I see some questions. Great, guys. I'm going to take some questions in the end. So hold on to these thoughts. Some of the most vivid questions that we have, vivid stories, I was going to say, that we have is from 1942, when artist Adrian Hill was healing from tuberculosis in a sanatorium. And the prognosis on him wasn't going too well. He was actually sort of, you know, deeply distressed, and the doctors were worried. And then one day, Adrian Hill asked someone to bring him books to the sanatorium. And we're talking about 1942 COVID, 1942 plague, and a sketchbook. And then, you know, with the little strength that he had, he starts sketching in bed and reading in between. And then something incredible, out of the ordinary happens. Adrian Hill starts feeling better. Now the doctors are testing it, you know, testing him. They can't believe it because they weren't really thinking that he's got a good chance. And nothing medically could be explained at that moment, because he was next to very ill people. They weren't doing any better. Why is he healing and they're not? It's because he was doing something else. I know it sounds crazy, but it's not that he was just doing something else. He got immersed in it. He loves the books. He loved sketching. So the next thing you know, he got out of bed and started sketching. And the next thing you know, he got well and got home. And once he got home, he started thinking about it, and he wanted to give a word to what he was experiencing, started researching it more. And then came the term art therapy by Adrian Hill, that we still know to these days as art therapy. So what's actually happening? What am I actually telling you with all of this? I'm actually telling you that in order to bypass this glass ceiling, this nagging area on the brain that's just going, you know, nagging you and wants you to push and push and push and feel negative things and think negative thoughts because this is what it's used to doing, we need to trick it a bit. And the only way of tricking it is bypassing it in some sort of an unexpected way. So let me give you another example of how this happens. I have a client who is an artist who was suffering from major depression, and it came to a point when, you know, he couldn't get out of bed and it was really bad. And then we were speaking, and I said, you know what? I decided to do the same thing. I said, we're not going to be speaking about your depression. And he looked at me puzzled, and he said, but how am I going to heal? I said, trust me, you're going to have to trust me on that. And then I asked my client what he likes to do when he's okay. And he said he liked board games, like, Checkmate or a couple of other things. And he liked books as well. So I asked him to pick a favorite book and bring a board game. And, we would just play. And, he was going along with it. But sometimes he would say, I'm paying you and this isn't therapy. And I said, okay, thanks for paying me. And you're just going to have to trust me with this. And this is what we would do. And, gradually, without paying attention, my client started playing with himself one day in bed when he was bored and he just felt like he wanted to do something. The next day he was sketching in bed. The next day he was sketching in the studio, and so on. You read my stream of thoughts. And then he comes up to me and says, okay, you tricked me. And I said, okay, yes, I tricked you. And, just to make sense of it all, what we really have to do is kind of take ourselves by surprise in order to tackle what we're used to doing. And I'm going to get back to that in a minute. But this is why it doesn't work when we push. It really doesn't work. And we really need to take a detour to leave this and tell ourselves, I trust you, I love you, I'm taking you very, very seriously. I'm taking this challenge seriously, but I'm going to open my faucet and make way for the universe to speak to me a little bit, because digging inside my brain, I'm not going to find any new solution to this. The fourth and last step around this is actually the weight. And this is something that I can also resonate with very much myself, because as a child, I would sit around and daydream a lot. And in a sense, it was fantastic because almost everything I daydreamed about came true in a way. But on the other hand, I would always wait for something to happen. It would be like, when I grow up, I'll do this and that. When I finish high school, I'm going to do this and that. When I graduate, when I'm rich, this thing. This is also, waiting is also calculating how long it takes the universe to do something. And the universe likes speed. And it's very hard for us to grasp that we don't always have to wait. The only wait is for our readiness. When things don't happen, it's only because we're not ready for them to happen yet. So what actually happens in the brain when this network goes down a little bit? Where the good news is that we get to manufacture higher levels of dopamine. That's a wonderful neurotransmitter that actually sort of balances our mood, so we feel more positive and we're more open to inspiration. So once we do this, the brain is actually going to mimic this behavior and do it too. We're tricking it to produce dopamine. So you're going to have the brain support gradually. And another thing is, once we go into the tips of what can be done, is thinking about things that we can do daily in order to get closer to our purpose. And I tell you one thing, and this is like, this is a paradigm shift. And this is, I think, one of the most important sentences I'll say in all of this talk, is that purpose doesn't work without inspiration. Inspirational purpose doesn't work without being inspired, without letting some of this come in. And most of the time, we're too busy doing what we're used to. So what I teach people to do is actually quiet the brain and trick the brain and readopt the brain to think in a different way. We need to learn how to think differently, to program ourselves, to reprogram. So one of the best ways is, taking the examples that I gave you, is just to do something small. You don't have to do something grandiose. It could be the smallest thing during the day. Let's say taking a walk in an unexpected time. What happens in a walk, and I'm sure that all of us have experienced this, is when we start walking, the first thing that comes is all the clutter that we have in our brain. We start blah, 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 going through all the course of the day, our chores, everything we want to do, our worries. But after a while, we get this magnificent sense, especially if we're in nature, that we all of a sudden start observing. We all of a sudden, the endorphins come in, everything's happening, dopamine, and we're just feeling good. And all of a sudden we have these eureka moments. People that, you know, go to the gym tell me about this. It happens all the time. But once we do this, like non-intentionally, and make space for it in our agenda and our calendar, that's when it can happen. So it could be a small walk. It doesn't have to be anything physical. It could be just stopping what you're doing, just like that, when you're stressed, and deciding to read a passage in a book that you like, listen to an inspirational video, make a hot drink that you like in the most awkward time, because then the brain is like, what are you doing? And you can bypass it and actually find space. And until you feel calm, you do not go back to your task. You do not if you want to be inspired. Once you let this theme affect you, that's when you can go back. Another thing that I'm very fond of is morning rituals. Now, why is that? It's because when we sleep, we have this momentum. Even if we were stressed the day before, we get into this, you know, sort of like a mute state. The brain is clear, and we can basically rebuild our beliefs the next day. But what do we usually do when we wake up in the morning? Grab our phones, you know, look at our phones, start reading through messages, emails, listening to people talk, start thinking about all the inner chatter that we're used to, because the brain is just going to project what you do every morning. And this is why morning rituals, if you wake a bit earlier to do this, are sacred. You know, President Roosevelt had this ritual that every day for 25 minutes, he would lock himself up in the office, and there was no disturbance. No one can enter the room under almost no circumstances. And it had to be quiet. And once he was asked, what are you doing there? He would say, journal. What are you journaling about? Like your to-do list? Yes. Is that all? No. I'm actually managing the state of mind I'm going to be working on all day long. Because guys, if you do this, it's almost like you decide what kind of way you're going to have with the world today, what kind of ambience, atmosphere. And once you decide this first thing in the morning, before all the clutter and, you know, rubbish and noise comes in, it's so much easier to not be so affected by things on the outside. Like when something gets us upset, it's going to be way easier to blow it away, because the mind is already focused and you bypassed it. You caught the brain before it starts its, you know, clutter and chatter. In the morning, I usually like to include a short meditation. Doesn't really have to be long, could be guided meditation, 10 minutes, a few notes, you know, just to write a few things down and end with something positive. And the good thing about a morning ritual is that you can look onto it the rest of your day, because, you know, sometimes the magic wears off. Sometimes at some point, you're going to feel sort of worn out, and you're going to go back to your old patterns. And it takes time, guys. This is practice. It's like practicing a new muscle. But since I did the morning ritual, I can always read what I've written in the morning. I can always reminisce on my energy, and I could get back. So the brain gets used to adopting to what I did in the morning. And yes, the brain can adapt to new habits. According to research, it takes about 66 days, but it really depends on what you do and how much you do it. And once you stop doing it, guess what happens? The old habits come back. But this is how we can really keep to our purpose, keeping our mind clear. The last thing, and this is where we end this talk before I'll take a few questions, that I would recommend is making short-term goals. You know, once we have very big goals, for some people, it's really exciting to think about big dreams, but I think that sometimes we feel overwhelmed. And this is why we go into that list, starting to calculate, starting to, you know, to run it through the universe, how it's going to happen, why it's going to happen. I don't believe this is going to happen. And then I say, no, you know, keep it mellow, chunk it down to 90-day goals. And some of this goal would be to actually keep to a morning ritual, for example, and see what happens. Just test it, because most of us don't even know what our inspirational purpose is. We're so far away from it. We're all programmed to do something else that we don't even pay attention. And the best way to actually begin is to listen. So guys, we've reached our time, I think. I see 45 minutes, and I guess, unfortunately, this is all we have. Tell me if I'm right, technical support. Anyway, I'm going to keep giving away free stuff. So I don't know if you guys saw it in my bio in the Guidely site, but you can all come up and have a free discovery call with me. You can answer the question. Okay. Okay, 5 more minutes. Okay, cool. Um, so you can basically access my recordings. Sorry, I got all mixed up here. 1 a.m. Sorry. I was just going to say that you can have a free discovery call with me, and together we can see where your inspirational purpose is at, how far away or close you're to it, and we can jolt it into purpose together. All the information about that is on the site, including my professional, my coaching email where you can reach me. So it's all fantastic. Come there and claim your prize. If we have like 2 more minutes, then what I'm actually going to share with you is that, you know, everything I'm telling you is based on modern psychology, studies of the brain, but I also love shamanism. And thousands of years ago, these have known to be um, real things that shamans were dealing with, like the old Naguals from Mexico. The Toltecs were talking about this, and they said that the issue with humankind is that we were not walking a path with a heart. Now, what does a path with a heart mean? It actually means, you know, being aligned to your purpose, really being inspired and having the will to change it if this is not what you feel. This is what it takes to be a wizard, to be a magician, to move forward step by step. And I'm just gonna give a last example to it. I think it's very empowering, but perhaps some of you have heard of Zig Ziglar. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was really a heartwarming person, wonderful motivational speaker. And there's this one program where one of his, there was this working committee coming in, and a lady comes on stage because, you know, the work got them to speak to Zig Ziglar, which is a big thing. And she comes up on stage and she says, "I hate my job." And so Zig Ziglar turns to her and says, "Okay, what do you want me to do about it?" And she says, "I don't know. I don't know what to do." And then he starts walking her through this and says, "Okay, so why do you hate your job?" She starts giving him his humongous list. And he says, "Okay, so look, you only have two options to make this, in a way, a path of the heart. You can either quit, change your vocation, or you can't cling to what was. Like we started this talk, you can't cling to this fantastic idea of what was before. You have to make yourself available to inspiration in the here and now. So either you quit your job or you love your job." And she said, "How am I going to love my job?" And he says, guess what? I'm going to give you free coaching if you follow my steps." So he tells her, "Give me 5 reasons why you love your job." And he starts helping her. He says, "Well, did your job send you off to meet Zig Ziglar?" "Yes." "Great. That's one reason why you love your job." "Are all the people in your job horrible?" "No, some of them are nice." "Great. Some of the people in my job are great. This is why I love my job." "Does it have like a good scenery? Do we have a coffee machine?" "Yes, you do." "Great. We have a coffee machine." So silly little things like that that are not silly at all. He told her to come up with 10. And then he said, "I'm going to coach you in a month's time, but you have to promise me that every day in front of the mirror, you're going to recite all of these, you know, reasons why you love your job, and say it like you believe it, even if you don't, and let's see what happens." So she does this. She's got nothing to lose. You know, "I love my job because, you know, I'm meeting Zig Ziglar, etc." She comes back to him after a month's time, and guess what happens? She loves her job. Why does she love her job? Because ever since she did that, she stopped pushing. She stopped pushing with everything that was annoying her. And she started sort of evacuating the area in order for something else to come in. The people she didn't like in the office miraculously disappeared. One of them got fired, another one was moved to another department, and she got promoted. She got more money. She got to choose her own team. So, yeah. Anyway, I think our time's up. So let's take some questions. Let me just see how I do this. Okay. So we have got some people. I'm just trying to figure out. Could you write in the chat? Let's see your questions. All right. Guys, sorry, I don't see your questions. I'm a bit technologically challenged here to see how I can actually receive them. Martin, I think you'll need to, oh, it's Marie. You'll need to unmute yourself, sweetie. Not working for some reason. Guys, if you want to talk, you're going to have to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you. Is there anyone else that wants to ask a question? Because I don't see Marie, honey, you're going to have to unmute yourself. You can write your questions in the, okay. Marie, please type your question into the chat box. Yes, please. You can't unmute yourself, please do that. Anybody is, you're all welcome to do that and write your question in the chat box, because you'll need to unmute yourself in order to speak. Oh, I hear someone. Marie, is that you? Hello.
Oh, goodness.
Marie? Hello. Oh, now I can see you. Great. What's your question, darling?
I don't have a question. I don't know what's happening. I'm on a phone and it just kind of went that way.
Oh, you lifted your hand. Okay. Okay. Great.
I didn't mean to. Sorry.
Okay. So just press down the hands. Anybody else has a question? Okay, let's see. Does positive affirmation help attract more money? Yes, positive affirmations absolutely help attract more money. But the thing is this, it's not just about the affirmations. I know people who have been practicing positive affirmations for years, but it wasn't working for them because, like I said, the other side of the brain was getting in the way. So you'll need to add something to it. I would say positive affirmations, and at the same time working on that space in your head that doesn't want you to cross the glass ceiling. I hope this is making it more clear, but just, you know, having some time to yourself to get inspired and sort of shifting your attention away from that negative area will help as well, because we have to balance the scale. It doesn't just work. I hope this answers your question. Okay, well, I think we have room for one more question, quick, because they need to evacuate the room. Anybody else have a question they want to quickly ask? All right. Well, everybody, it's been lovely, lovely, lovely to have you all here. You're very, very welcome to pop into my page and turn to me for your free discovery call. Love you all. Enjoy the rest of your summit and have a great day. You're most welcome, all of you.